My name's Rob Collins. I work in the Prudential Policy Directorate at the Bank of England, focusing on governance, remuneration, and the senior managers regime. John's probably shifting around a bit uncomfortably at that one, but I'm off duty at the moment. I also seem to have been given a promotion a bit earlier to head of capital markets by the Lord Mayor. Gladly received, but I don't think the UK economy would appreciate that.
We've invited you here, kind of as Lorraine said, because you had a conversation with somebody in a team, and can you tell us a bit more about what happened there?
I was kind of matrix managing. It's a bit of a corporate term, but matrix managing a project at the Financial Ombudsman Service. There's a group of maybe 5 or 6 people. One of them, a girl called Laura, it's not actually her real name. Laura started to act a bit unusually. She was coming in quite late. She wasn't looking like she was taking care of herself. She's someone who took pride in her appearance. It looked a bit strange to me for several weeks, and then one day, quite late, she was crying at her desk. Obviously, that's not a normal thing to see in the workplace. So I had an inkling that something wasn't right. But when I saw that she was crying at her desk, I went over to have a conversation with her.
But how did you know what to say?
That's a good question. I don't think that there is anything really that anyone is ever going to say wrong in a situation like that. It can simply be a matter of going asking, is someone okay? That's not, if someone's in tears, they're obviously not okay. But just asking to step away from the desk, go and have a conversation. It may feel a bit uncomfortable or intimidating, but honestly, I don't think that there is a wrong thing to say in that situation. We've all felt low. We've all had somebody come and speak to us when we're feeling low. I think it's fairly natural. I think it's within everybody. So I'll just encourage people to not overthink it.
I think, though, it can sometimes be quite difficult to have that human response. It's easy to call it a human response, I think, when you're in an audience at an event like this. But when you're actually in that situation, could you kind of tell us a bit more about what was going through your head at that time? What made you decide, I'm the person that's going to do something about this, or get the confidence to sit up and do something?
There's a few layers to that. I mean, first, from personal experience, about 2011, I spent a month in the Priory being treated for depression. Actually, something I started my career in the legal sector. I left a training contract because I was depressed. So I can empathise a lot with what Jonathan was talking about. So there's some lived experience there, but then also I think I kind of had a human responsibility. There was somebody who's under my care who's obviously not very well. But then there's also what made me stand up and do something was, I think everybody really feels empathy. And if you see somebody in distress, honestly, I think that anybody really has that want or urge to go and help.
And you mentioned earlier that the thing that made you decide to go and have the conversation was when you saw her crying at your desk. But you also talked about some other signs and symptoms that you'd seen before. Is it in hindsight that you realised that's what it was, or did you have an inkling at the time?
Both. I think definitely in hindsight, I would have liked to have gone and spoken to her earlier rather than it reach what was obviously a crisis point. But then also I did feel that something was brewing. Somebody starts acting that you're around most days, starts acting differently or out of character. I think it's hard to really pinpoint that something is definitely wrong, but I could definitely feel something.
And some people in the audience might be recognising you today because you are one of the celebrity features, one of the
A bit
people
strong.
giving advice in our Wellbeing in the City tool, which was developed with the Samaritans. That gives some hints and tips about how to have that conversation. But do you have any to share today?
Uh, so that tool is really good because it's in two parts. You don't have to watch the part with me. Um, the second part actually about active listening is really good. I think that reinforces probably one of my top tips, which is usually any response. So asking the question is one thing, are you okay? And she obviously wasn't, or can we have a conversation? Um, the I know that there's an anxiety about what the bit afterwards that comes back at you, because asking the question is one thing, and then listening to the response is another thing, and you don't know what the person's going to say. But that tool and the active listening skills actually just encourages you to listen. It's very interactive, so you actually get a role play where you get to choose your responses. I don't want to spoil it for you, but most of the responses are right. But sitting and listening, you don't, and kind of being confident that you don't have to fix anything. You're not an expert. I'm not an expert. Just listening to somebody, and then, if necessary, signposting them to the right place. We ended up uh, working with her manager. She ended up being treated for depression and anxiety. But I mean, being confident just to listen and realize that you don't have to have the answers to fix the problem would be a top tip.
Yeah, and I think on reflection, that's something that actually all of our speakers today have mentioned in the Mental Health Allies program, is that it's about having the conversation and not necessarily about solving the problem, and that can go quite a way. So it's nice to hear that coming through from you and your own personal experience as well. I guess the Wellbeing in the City tool and your experience is focused on that individual response to a situation like that. But a lot of the people that we have in the audience here are from organisations and employers who will be responsible for putting in place some actions for their employees. You don't have to you don't have to have the answer to everything. But do you have any kind of things that you'd like to share that you think it would be helpful for employers to put into place?
I mean, circulating the Wellbeing in the City tool uh, is
Thank you. Yeah.
is great. Um, Anecdotally, people at work have actually put into practice the active listening skills, not in a mental health space. So, active listening can be deployed basically in any industry or in any walk of life. With your own family, that can be quite useful. So, in terms of employers, I think somebody said earlier that it's okay to not be okay. I think that was John. Um, I would encourage all employers to take that attitude that sometimes or often your staff are not going to be okay, and being comfortable that that's okay and giving your employees confidence to feel comfortable sometimes not being okay, I think that's a really strong message, and I like that.
And you're currently working at Bank of England, who I know are doing quite a lot of work in this area. Is there anything, whilst you have the stage, that you'd like to share from there?
Uh, uh, yeah, I mean, since I've been working there, I've felt very comfortable being open with my managers and senior managers about um, the treatment that I've received in the past. My own mood goes up and down like everybody else's, so I didn't just kick depression to the curb and then leave it behind. It does come back every now and again. So they're very supportive. And again, I'll just go back to the Wellbeing in the City tool. They're being, they have embraced it and encouraged staff to use it, and yeah.
And I think you mentioned that the Wellbeing in the City tool has two parts. So the second part is about active listening, but there's a whole other section about looking after yourself. And it can be emotionally draining on the person having that conversation. Is that something that you experienced or have seen other people go through?
Yes, I have experienced that. It's important if you do have a conversation like that. Obviously, not every conversation is going to end dramatically, but they are tough conversations. It's important, in my opinion, to speak to somebody. Doesn't matter if it's formal or informal. Speak to somebody about the conversation that you've just had, rather than keep it to yourself. I think it is draining sometimes, but also it's quite uplifting. I think sometimes, particularly when you see tangible results coming from having a conversation like that.
Thank you. I think we're out of time now, but just to kind of, I think it was so lovely to hear you talk about your experience on both sides, and thank you kind of for sharing that with us as being something that you think has benefited you rather than something that you had to do, and how we should all just feel more confident to have a conversation and be less worried about what that conversation is going to be. Just have the conversation, and there are tools and resources out there to support people that do want to know more should that happen. But you had one without any of those resources in place, and it went fine. So thank you so much.